Hello, and welcome to another Own Your Judaism video. My name is Moish Steigman, the Mindful Rabbi, and this video is in response to a question that Mason asked. Mason is the son of my dear friends Dara and Doug. Dara and I met in Israel our junior year of college when we spent a semester at Hebrew University, then met Doug. Our families have become and remained friends, and Mason, 15 years old, recently asked his mom, Dara, the following question. He asked, if God knows all that will happen, then why give humans free will? It's a powerful question. It's a question that you, Mason, even at 15 years old, are not alone in asking. And Dara, in her wisdom and confidence and thoughtfulness, shared her viewpoints with Mason and then thought, hey, maybe we should reach out to my friend Moish, the rabbi. And here we are, answering Mason's powerful question. Mason, buckle up, because I have 7 different possible responses for you, and it's the 7th one that resonates most with me. So if God knows all that will happen, then why give humans free will? Answer number 1, possibility number 1, is actually something, Mason, that your mom told me you suggested. Maybe God knows everything. Maybe God knows everything that we're going to do, and God is just having fun watching us. Possibility number 1. Possibility number 2 is that God, even though God knows everything that will happen, gave us free will only for reasons that God and God alone understands. That your question, Mason, is a question that we as human beings crave to know, but maybe this is only an answer that God is able to understand. Possibility number 3. Maybe God does not know everything. Maybe the idea that God is omniscient, is all-knowing, is a false idea. Possibility number 4, Mason, is that God does know everything except what is in our hearts. God knows everything happening in the world. God knows everything going on. But what's in our hearts, our inclinations, our hopes, our dreams, our temptations, our fears, those are ours and ours alone. And that is what allows us to have agency and direction in our lives. Possibility number 5. That God and human beings approach this question very differently. That for God, this is a question of omniscience. God knows everything. This is what part of what makes God God. Wonderful, awesome, powerful, amazing, maybe a little bit scary, and certainly incomprehensible to people. That from God's perspective, God just knows everything because that's who and what and how God is. But we as human beings, that question doesn't matter so much for us. It doesn't matter so much if God does or doesn't know everything. It doesn't matter if God is or is not omniscient. What matters for us is that we can only make the best choices that we can with our capacity. We have gifts. We have abilities. We have the capacity to learn, to grow, to seek, to understand, and to make this world a better place. And whether or not God knows the words that I'm about to say next, whether or not God knows whether the wind is going to blow and knock over something in my backyard, doesn't change from my perspective that I feel free to make choices. Possibility number 6. Perhaps God knows the past, and perhaps God knows the present. God knows everything that has happened. How much would you love God to be there with you when you're taking tests in history class? God knows everything that has happened. God knows everything that is happening right now. God doesn't have to turn on television. God doesn't have to read the newspaper. God doesn't have to be in 10 places at once. God simply knows everything that has happened and everything that is happening. But God does not know what is going to happen in a minute, in a month, in a year, in a millennium. That God is omniscient for the past and for the present, but maybe not for the future. I said there were 7 answers, Mason, and those were 6 of the 7 answers. I also said that the 7th answer was my favorite. So very, very quickly, maybe God is just having fun. Maybe only God knows the answer to this question. Maybe God does not know everything. Maybe God knows everything but what is in our hearts. Maybe from God's perspective, God is omniscient, but from our perspective, we still feel free to choose. And maybe God knows the past and the present, but not the future. Before I offer my 7th response, possibility, to your question, Mason, let me share a story that comes from the rabbis. Let me share a Midrash. The Midrash says that originally, when God created the world, God did not give the people free will. And in turn, everything that the people did was perfect in God's eyes. They followed all the rules. They didn't do anything wrong. And ultimately, God was unsatisfied with the world. So much so that God destroyed the world and created it anew. And here too, in this second world, God did not give people free will. God made people act according to God's will. Everything they did was right according to God, and God yet again was unsatisfied and destroyed that world and created the world anew. And so on and so on and so on. God kept creating the worlds, not giving people free will, and destroying the worlds when God was dissatisfied. Until finally God created the world and gave people free will. Whereupon the angel said to God, God, what are you doing? This is crazy. Don't you know that if you give people free will, they're going to do evil. They're going to do bad. They're going to disobey you. And God said, yes. And this is the world that I want. Because when they choose good, when they act righteously, then I'll know that they are doing it from their hearts. I share that story, Mason, because this leads me to believe that God wants us as people to make choices for ourselves. That God wants us to choose our direction in our lives. That God has given us the gift of God's wisdom, the Torah, to help guide us in our lives, to help direct our hearts, and to help focus our actions. And so I believe ultimately, Mason, that we do have choice in what we do. And God does not know with absolute infinite certainty what's going to happen in a minute, let alone in a century. So then what's another possible way to respond to your question, Mason? That if God knows all that will happen, then why give humans free will? Well, again, I believe God wants us to have free will, that God does not know all that will happen. If that's the case, though, then how can God really be omniscient? How can God know everything? For me, the most compelling response to that question came from Rabbi Jeff Siegelman. My first pulpit after I finished rabbinical school was at Westchester Jewish Center in Mamaroneck, New York. Rabbi Siegelman was the senior rabbi there. And I do not remember the context in which Rabbi Siegelman gave this answer. I don't remember if he and I were having a conversation, if he was giving a sermon, if he was teaching a class, or if he was simply talking to someone in the corridors of the synagogue. But his answer always stuck and resonated with me. God, the reason it seems that God knows everything is because God is the best at making predictions. In fact, it's not that God knows everything, but that to this point, God is the perfect predictor of what is to come. Imagine I take a deck of cards, and they're not shuffled. You go ace of spades, 2 of spades, 3 of spades, 4 of spades, up to the king of spades. Then the ace of diamonds to the king of diamonds. Then the king of hearts to the ace of hearts, and the king of clubs to the ace of the clubs. And then I start turning over the cards one at a time. Ace of spades, 2 of spades, 3 of spades, 4 of spades, so on and so on, all the way until we get to the end of the deck. 4 of hearts, 3 of hearts, 2 of hearts. And then I say, Mason, I want you to predict what this last card is going to be. I am sure you're going to get it right. You're going to know it's the ace of hearts. Why? because you know the entirety of the past. You know every card that has come before. And you know that the only card left in that deck in the present is the Ace of Hearts. And therefore, in the future, when I turn that card over, you are going to be correct that it's the Ace of Hearts. It's the same thing Rabbi Siegelman taught with God. God knows everything in the past. God knows everything in the future, in the present. And so God does not know the future, but God is able to predict so far with perfection what is going to happen. Which means ultimately God is simply the best flawless predictor around. And despite that, and even with that knowledge, we are still able to make choices on our own and for ourselves. Mason, thank you for the wonderful, wonderful question. Dara, thank you for your permission to share this question publicly with the video. For anyone who's watching, thank you for watching. And if you have any questions, please send them my way. You can put them in the comments. You can send me an email, Moishe, M-O-I-S-H-E, at ownyourjudaism.org. Thank you for watching, and I hope you are all in the middle of a wonderful day.